time to fight the Illusioner. There's clones. Hope you guys enjoyed that little bit at the beginning. That's just a teaser for what this boss fight looks like. If you guys want to see the whole boss fight, it will be unedited at the end of the video, so you guys can see that whole boss fight and get the full experience. But for now, let's talk about what this Illusioner is and what he can do. In order to summon the Illusioner, all you need to do is take this Totem of Undying and drop it right on the enchantment table. Now, of course, I'm not using the actual Illusioner, we're actually using an Evoker with a swollen head, because the Illusioner doesn't exist in Minecraft, in the Bedrock edition. It's only in Java as a secret mob. What we're trying to do with this boss fight is take the idea from the Illusioner and make it into our own custom boss fight for you guys to use for yourself. The goal is not necessarily a super difficult, but a very tricky mob that messes up what you can see and what you know to be real. That's kind of the whole goal with this mob, and I hope you guys enjoy. But the simple idea here is that we take this Totem of Undying, and we can drop it on the enchantment table. Similar to my other boss fights, we're going to have a little bit of a cutscene for this guy to spawn in. Once he spawns in, he's going to have a couple attacks that you guys are going to want to look out for. The first of which is represented by these commands right here, is to summon in clones of himself. Basically, these clones are going to have all the same abilities that he has, except they're not going to have very much health. You're going to be able to kill them in one hit with most weapons. But while there are any clones active, the actual Illusioner is going to be invisible. So in order to really be able to fight the real Illusioner, you have to figure out where all the clones are and get rid of them. It's also going to make it easier because these clones have the same attacks as the normal guy and are just as dangerous. The next set of attacks that you want to look out for is his creepers. So instead of summoning Vex like a normal Evoker would, every time the Evokers try to summon in Vex, they're going to be replaced with Illusioner creepers. Now these creepers are special because they're a little bit faster than a normal creeper, and whenever you're not near them, they're actually invisible. Now they do have some particle effects, so they're not completely invisible, but they're very hard to see, and they're really easy to sneak up on you. Which perfectly plays into the next thing, which occasionally makes creeper noises play right behind you, as if there's a creeper about to blow up right behind you. And you never really know if it's a real creeper or if it's a little trick creeper that's just being played. So you have to be always on your toes while you're fighting this guy. The next attack is that the Evocation Fang spikes, the little spike attacks that the Evokers do, now have an additional smoke effect. When they're traveling along the ground, they're going to have some smoke that's going to puff out, and if one of these spikes hits you, you're going to be covered in smoke for a brief period of time, making it really difficult to see and even harder to fight. After all this, we finally get to kill the Evoker. Or maybe not. So instead of having just a normal first and second phase, after you kill the Illusioner for the first time, you're going to get a little message in chat saying that the Illusioner has been defeated. When in reality, he's actually lifted up into the sky and is about to kill you and enter a second phase. See, we basically fake his own death by turning him invisible, and then we get ready for the second phase. Now the second phase has all the same attacks as the first phase, a bunch of new health, and most importantly, as you guys saw in the little preview, it actually is messing with your camera. As you're going through the fight, it's going to change and rotate your camera to a bunch of different perspectives. Sometimes it'll be over your right shoulder, then it's going to switch to directly overhead, then it'll switch to the position of your feet, and finally it's going to actually be the boss looking at you. So you're going to see what the boss sees while you're fighting it. And it's going to be rotating through these different view modes that make it really difficult to fight and just make it a really cool illusion boss for you guys to be able to fight and mess around with. So let's do a quick demonstration. You guys already saw a bit of the preview and you'll see the full fight at the end. But now that you know what each of the attacks does, let's take a look at how they actually work. And I will note that the Illusioner, his clones, and the creepers that are spawned in all do have swollen heads. There's no reason for this, I just thought it looked funny. But you can see there's smoke, the Totem of Undying, then the Illusioner is summoned in. We get a little thing in chat that the Illusioner laughs from night. Shortly after he first spawns in, the player screens get flashed and 4 of these clones will spawn in. Now, like I said, they can be killed super easily. Doesn't even matter. And as soon as they're killed, boom, the real one's gonna pop up. Now, I'm going to show you, I'm going to pull back the curtain a little bit. We have a clone, and this is actually his cooldown. So once that cooldown hits about 0, he's actually going to flash my screen again and summon in 4 more clones. Ignore the volcano. Basically, what's happening is he flashes the screen, so you have a really hard time knowing which one is the real one, because he goes invisible as soon as all the clones spawn in. So the real one is... I don't even know. He got away. There he is. There's the real one. Hi, buddy. Ignore this volcano, please. Basically, we have this ability to clone. Now, one thing that I forgot to mention is that you'll see he's going to flash again, and it's going to set the cooldown. It sets it to a random number. This time it's 20. But the cooldown isn't working. Once I kill all these clones, or they get blown up by the volcano, you see the cooldown turns back on. So he's actually not going to be on cooldown until all the clones nearby are killed. The other 2 attacks, the Creeper and the Evoker Fang, are based purely on the natural attacks of the Evoker, which is why they're not currently functioning, because I'm in a creative mode. Now you can see when the Illusioner dies, or gets to his second phase, it tells you he dies, and then he actually goes up into the sky, becomes invisible, and heals up. Then he's going to start rotating through his unique attacks, and boom. Now we're at the Illusioner, phase 2. And just because I don't feel like dealing with it, he's dead, for real this time. And that is how you make the Illusioner boss. So, let's get into the commands. First 2 commands that we have here are super simple. They're technically optional. I quite like them though. This command right here is just going to make any of the Illusioner, so the main boss and its clones, all have a big head. It's entirely optional, but it's fun, and it makes it look a little bit more unique than the regular Illusioner, than the regular Evoker. And since we're not technically supposed to be fighting an Evoker, though we don't have the Illusioner model in-game, this is what we do instead. Similarly to that, and just for fun, the Illusion Creepers that have the ability to go invisible have the same animation going on, so they also have swollen heads. No real reason, it's just kind of for fun. That's all. The next thing we're going to do is just create these 4 scoreboards that you see displayed here. You don't have to type them into a command block. You can if you want to, how I have it here, or you can just type them in the chat. You just need to make sure you make the scoreboards that we have. I typed them into command blocks so you can see what they do. The first thing we're doing, create a scoreboard Illusion, create the scoreboard for Clone, create the scoreboard for Cam Ats, which is like camera attack, and finally create the scoreboard for Smoke. Next up, we're going to get into the actual summoning commands. Starting here, we're just checking for an item named Total of Undying. We're going to check if there's an enchanting table in the same block, and then if that is the case, the Total of Undying is going to increase in the illusion score. So I will demonstrate this briefly. As you can see, we have illusion on the right side of the screen. As soon as I drop this totem, it's going to start charging up. Now, as it's charging, it's going to be doing a bunch of different particle effects, and when it hits the final level, level 10, then it's going to do the rest of the summoning in for the actual boss. So, the next command that we're going to be doing is checking for the Total of Undying to have an illusion score between 1 and 10. That means it's charging up. If that is the case, we're going to have the knockback war particle. This is just going to give it some particle effects while the thing's summoning in, makes it look more cinematic. Next up, we're going to play sound beacon. So all we're doing here is while it's charging up, we're going to have some custom sounds playing. Should also mention that this is on a 5-tick delay. Next up, we're going to actually summon it in. So once the illusion score is level 11, we're going to summon in an Evocation Illager. It's not an Evoker, it's called an Evocation Illager. And we're going to name it Illusioner. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to check out the Total of Undying. We're going to give this boss the tag Boss Ill. This is how we're differentiating between the normal clones and the actual boss itself. Because the actual boss is going to have this tag and the others won't have this tag. Next up, we're just going to kill the Total of Undying. It gets rid of it, make sure we're not, it makes sense for it to be consumed, that's all. Next, we're going to be giving the boss some actual effects. This right here, health boost, is just going to give it some bonus health, make it harder to kill. We're also checking, is it the boss ill? So it's only the boss and not the clones, but it doesn't have the tag illusion. The tag illusion is the spawn tag. Once the spawning process is done, then the illager is going to get the tag illusion, and that's going to make it so it's no longer doing these spawning commands. Next up, we're going to give it instant health. It's the exact same command but with instant health. This is just going to make sure that the actual health from the boss fills up the missing health that we just gave it. Next, we're going to give it a totem of undying in its main hand. This is how we're going to check that it dies, so we can fake the effect of death and then have it spawn in for the second phase, basically. The next thing that we're going to be doing is setting the scoreboard of clone from a random number to 3 to 8. This means that clones are going to spawn in on a slightly randomized time, somewhere between 3 to 8 seconds after the boss fight starts. This just makes it so it gets its first attack off a lot easier. Subsequent attacks are going to have a longer cooldown, but if you guys want to make this cooldown longer or shorter, make these numbers higher or lower depending on what you want. If you want a shorter cooldown, make these numbers lower. If you want a longer cooldown from the start, make these numbers higher. Whatever you do, just make sure that the first of these two numbers is lower than the second two. Next up, we're going to be giving the scoreboard illusion to the illusioner. All this is doing is managing the cinematics, so the opening camera cutscene type thing. This is going to be the timer for that. During this whole cutscene, the entire illager boss is going to be forced to be still. This is what this command does. Next, we're going to be actually maneuvering the player's camera to more or less be right in the face of the illusioner boss, looking at it. We're going to be doing this, which is the actual fades. That way it fades to black briefly before showing the actual boss. And this is going to be fading back at the end of the cutscene. As you can see, the illusion score is 39, and the illusion score ends at 40. Then we're going to be checking to clear the camera of anybody who has a cam attack of 0. Now the cam attack is also going to be doing some stuff at the end in the second phase, which is why we want to make sure we're clearing players at the end of the cutscene, but we're not clearing the camera of players in the final phase of the boss. Next up, we're going to give the boss the tag illusion. This just means it's done with all the spawning and we can actually get into the fight. While this is all going on, we're also going to be adding a camera shake. It just makes the boss look a little scarier as the fight's getting ready to go on. Then we're just going to be playing some sounds during all of this, makes it sound a little bit cooler during the cutscene. Then we're going to give the player a message. You guys are welcome to change this to whatever you like, but I like the illusioner laughs maniacally. And of course, if you guys want to change the text, just change what is in the quotations. This part is optional, but it is a quite nice feature to have. Next up, what we're going to be doing is just having it so as the players are coming out of the cutscene, they're going to be automatically facing the boss. This way, in case the player ran away, they're not like confused about where the boss is when the cutscene's over. And yes, that's a lot, but that is all that there is for spawning it in with the actual spawn cutscene. It gets a little bit simpler after that, because now we're just going to get into the attacks. The first of these attacks is quite simple, and this is the clone commands. So for the clone, what we're checking is if the clone score is 0 or higher, then it's going to remove clone 1. However, this is on a 20 tick delay. That means every second, one clone score is going to be removed from the boss. Next up, whenever the clone score equals -1, which means the boss is actually ready for the fight to happen, what we're going to do is flash the camera. So any player in the area is going to get a brief flash of light. If you guys want to change it, you can change these to RGB values, but you don't have to. If you're not good with camera, just keep these the same color. What happens is the player's camera gets flashed, that way they can't quite see what's going on. It makes the clones a little bit easier to kind of blend in. Then we're going to be summoning in the 4 clones. All we're doing is, at the illusioner that has a clone score of -1, summon an evocation illager named illusioner. We're going to keep it the same name so you're not sure if it's the real one or not, but we just have these coordinates, +1, +1. Next command is exactly like it, except we have -1 here. The next command exactly the same, except the 1 is at the end of these coordinates. And finally, it's this exact same, except we have a -1 at the end of these coordinates. This just makes it so that a clone is going to summon on each side of the actual illusioner. Then what we're going to be doing is damaging all of the illusioners. What this actually does is make it so the clones are not at full health, and it's a lot easier for them to be killed by the player, since we don't want them to be full health mobs. These are just meant to be almost like holograms or illusions. And lastly, we're going to change the actual cooldown. So it's going to, after all this attack is done, it's going to set the cooldown to a random number between 11 seconds and 22 seconds. Similar to what I said earlier, if you want a longer cooldown, make these numbers higher. If you want a shorter cooldown, make these numbers lower. It's up to you guys how you want to tune this, but you will need to do this in order to actually reset the cooldown. Then there's just 2 more commands that we're going to be doing. The first of which is the boss is going to check, is there any clones nearby? That means something named Illusioner but does not have the tag Boss Sill. If so, it's going to give itself invisibility. The other thing that we're going to be doing is checking if there is a boss, kill any totems of Undying within 40 blocks. This just means that if there is any clones that are in the area and they're dying, they're not going to give you totems of Undying, or you're going to be spamming them throughout the fight, and you don't necessarily want that. And that's it for these set of commands. Next up, we have the Special Creeper attack. So this is pretty simple. All we're doing is checking at the Evocation Illager. Is there any Vex within the area? If so, summon an Illusion Creeper. Now, what we're going to do is we're actually going to kill the Vex immediately after. So you're not going to have Vex, you're only going to have the Creepers instead. Then we're going to give all these Creepers speed, because I'm mean, and because it's fun. And finally, we're going to give all of these Creepers invisibility. Now, we are going to give the invisibility a clear, so essentially what's going to happen is, if a player is within 5 blocks of the creeper, the invisibility is going to get removed, so that way players will know that there are creepers, but hopefully it'll be too late. That's kind of the whole deal. It's meant to be something that kind of pranks the player, tricks them, and scares them. Now, at the same time, since the player is now aware that there might be invisible creepers around them at any given moment, we're doing this command, and this is on a 300 tick delay. All this does is at any player within range of the boss, it's going to just, every once in a while, play the creeper fusing sound right behind the player to make them think there's a creeper about to blow up behind them. We have a second one of these. Now this is on a 270 tick delay, but it is exactly the same command. This just makes it so it's not on an exact pattern that you hear these fake creeper noises, and hopefully we'll have a lot of fun tricking the player with that. There was a couple of times in the boss fight you'll see at the end where I had to check behind me because I actually heard these commands going off. So it's a really fun way to trick the players. Now, the final attack for the first phase of the boss is the actual smoke things that you saw. So what we're doing here is we're checking as evocations, fangs, go along the surface. If they don't have the tag smoke, we're going to give them the knockback war particle. This is just going to make it so each fang has 1 puff of smoke every single time it spawns in. But after it smokes, we're going to give it the tag smoke. This just prevents it from having 2 puffs of smoke per thing and being a little bit too spammy and laggy. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to check if there is an Illusioner. For all Evocation Fangs nearby, it's going to set any player that gets hit by an Evocation Fang to a smoke score of 6. This is the actual status effect that more or less blinds the player. So if you guys want to increase this number, make it so the smoke effect lasts longer, just make this a higher number. Or if you think this is too long, just make it lower. It's up to you guys. The whole thing is about blinding the player and tricking them a little bit. Hopefully they can avoid it and just not get hit with fangs at all. Then we're going to be removing the smoke score for players because we don't want it to last forever. So it's going to basically tick down. This is on a 10 tick delay. Then all that we're going to be doing is checking for any player that has a smoke score that's not 0 or higher than 0. It's going to be playing the smoke particle. This is on a 0 tick delay. This makes it so whenever I have the smoke score, it's just going to be constantly blinding my face. And finally, we get to the death. At least the first one. What we're doing here is more or less the exact same thing that we did when we spawned, but what we're seeing is, does the thing have the tag illusion? That means it already got its first totem, but now it is not having a totem. So we're using has item to check totem with a quantity of 0. This checks if the boss does not have the totem of Undying, which means that you essentially cleared its first bar of health. But it also doesn't have the tag Cam A, which represents the second phase or camera attack. So essentially, once we beat the first phase of the boss, we're going to give it health boost times 30, so it's going to give it a ton of extra health. And then after that, we're going to give it a few seconds of healing. So pretty simple. This just brings the boss mercs for the second phase and gives it new health. But this fight does a little bit more than that. The next thing it does is it checks for this boss with the missing totem, and it tells players the Illusioner is defeated. This is really fun because the first time players beat this, they're like, oh yay, we won, when actually you didn't. So this is more or less meant to trick the player. Next up, we're going to give the tag Invis Block. This just makes it so for a brief period, there's not going to be any invisible stuff being cleared. Then we're going to give this illusioner the levitation effect. This lifts it into the air. It just makes it a little bit more fun when it comes back. It seems like it's dropping down on you, and it also makes it so the player isn't accidentally hitting them while their corpse is invisible, waiting for the second phase to start up again. Next, we're going to give it slow falling. This way it doesn't take fall damage, and also just slowly descends onto the battlefield once it turns visible again. And the player gets to have an idea of what's happening before it's actually on the ground fighting. This right here is just a death explosion emitter. All we're doing here is making it look as though the thing died by applying some smoke particles. Next thing is, of course, we're giving invisibility, so that way you're not actually certain whether or not it's even dead. Then we're giving it fire resistance, which might seem a bit weird, but we have two reasons for this. If the player has fire aspect or flame, and they hit the thing with Totem of Undying, the goal is it's supposed to be invisible so players think it's dead. If it's flaming, players will clearly know it's not dead. Additionally, the Totem of Undying gives the illusioner fire resistance when it dies, which you can see the particles of. So we don't want to see the particles, so we're actually clearing the fire resistance off of this boss. The next thing we're going to be doing is essentially the same thing. The Totem of Undying gives players regeneration, which has particles. We don't want to see the particles of the invisible boss, that way you're convinced it's dead. So we make its regeneration 0. Once again, same thing. You get absorption, we remove the absorption. And finally, we give the tag Cam A after all of this. Cam A just means that it's in the second phase and it's ready to use its camera attacks on you. Last but not least, we have the actual camera attacks that are going to be in game. So we have a scoreboard that's controlling them. So what we're doing is checking for anything with the tag Cam A. So that's the boss in its second phase. It's going to, for any players within 40 blocks, up the score of the cam attack +1. Next, what we're doing is we're actually clearing the camera attack, setting its -1 if the boss is not nearby. That way the player's camera doesn't get stuck if the boss is killed in the middle of a camera attack. And what we're doing here is, if the player score is -1, it's just going to clear the camera and make it back to normal. And then once it sets a -1, it's going to set it back to 0. That way it's not clearing it too much if you have other camera things going around. Then we're going to have the actual camera positionings. So the first of these is we're checking, is the camera between 11 and 15? If so, then we're going to do this long camera command that I did on a live stream that you guys don't have to understand. Just copy it how you see it, but this is essentially going to make it so you're looking over your right shoulder, this one. The next of these is, once again, a very complicated, but we're checking if the camera score is between 16 and 20. If so, it's going to be directly above you and looking down. Next up, we're going to do more or less the normal camera, except it's going to be at your feet instead of at your head, which makes aiming things a little bit more difficult. And finally, my favorite of the camera positions, we're actually going to move our camera to be the boss's point of view, looking at ourselves. And you guys may have seen that in the intro, and you will see it in the final fight. And finally, if the cam attack is 31 or higher, it's just going to clear the camera, giving you a period of normal viewpoint. This way, if you're not able to fight it during the special camera attacks, you will have a period of time in which you can fight without it messing up your camera. And of course, finally, we're going to make it so if your camera attack is 46 or higher, it goes back to 1. This just resets the whole attack. And boy, what a mouthful that was. I hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys were able to follow and understand what was going on. If you guys get trouble, get stuck, remember, please follow the commands exactly as how they were displayed on screen. Make sure that the scoreboards are existing, that you created them, or else it's not going to work. If you do have questions, you are welcome to leave them in the comments, but I also recommend joining our Discord, as there's a lot of people who can help you, including me, and it's just a lot easier to help you on Discord than it is in the YouTube comment section. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed, and after this is the full fight between me and the Illusioner. Hope you guys enjoy, and take on the Illusioner yourself. Bye. It's time to fight the Illusioner. What the? Right here. I beat him. Hopefully for real this time. Hello.